Okay. So, here we go. Okay, so just for your information, all attendees are muted automatically on arrival to the session, so don't have any fear that any conversations you have in the background will be overheard. You're all muted now. We will be using the chat facility to answer your questions during the session. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat box at the bottom of the control panel to the right of your screen, as I've described before. And Katie and Natisha will pick these up. Okay. We should have all disappeared by now, so you'll just hear our voices from here on out. Okay. Since you've been seeing us, we would like to see some action from you now. We will be launching the first poll and would appreciate your response on the following question.
Okay, I'm just launching the first poll to ask if you've previously submitted an application under any of the previous calls. I'll just give you just 1 minute to answer that. Okay, can everyone see the question? If I can get a response, and then we can move on with the presentation. Okay, that's great. We've got all attendees have not submitted any applications under previous calls, so hopefully you should all learn a lot today. So thank you for answering that.
Hi again, so I hope you've all enjoyed that, and it won't be the last of our polls, so stay alert. Okay, so just to give you an overview of what we'll be covering today, I'll start by giving you a quick introduction to Key Action 3 and what funding is available. And then our focus, the main focus of the session will be on the application form itself and completing it in part. We'll first talk you through what you need to do beforehand. Then we will go through the application form together, filling out certain parts, showing you how to use the distance calculator and how to validate the form. Then we will round up the key points that we go through. And finally, we'll mention the next steps and how to contact us for support in the run-up to the deadline. Okay. So, Key Action 3 is all about supporting policy reform. It enables organisation policymakers and a range of other actors to become involved in strategic activities that will support policy reform across the EU in education, training and youth. The ultimate aim is for these activities to help achieve the goals of the Europe 2020 strategy. the ET 2020, which is the Strategic Framework for European Cooperation in Education and Training, and the European Youth Strategy. Under Key Action 3, the national agency is responsible for managing structured dialogue, which is meetings between young people and decision makers in the field of youth. The UK National Agency is a partnership between the British Council and Ecorus. Key Action 3 structured dialogue is being managed by us at Ecorus UK. Other types of projects under Key Action 3, such as cooperation with international organisations, are managed centrally by the Executive Agency of the European Commission. We won't be talking about these actions during the webinar today, but you can find out more information in Part B of the Programme Guide on page 183 to 184. Okay. So, structured dialogue with young people serves as a forum for continuous joint reflection on the priorities, implementation and follow-up of European cooperation in the youth field. It involves regular consultations of young people and youth organisations at all levels in the EU countries, as well as a dialogue between youth representatives and policymakers at EU youth conferences organised by member states holding the EU presidency and during European Youth Week. The structured dialogue focuses on a different overall thematic priority for each of the 18-month work cycles set by the Council of Youth Ministers. The thematic priority of the trio presidency, which currently is Netherlands, Slovakia and Malta, for January 2016 to June 2017, is enabling all young people to engage in a diverse, connected and inclusive Europe, ready for life and ready for society. Structured dialogue with young people is conducted around the current thematic priority at both national and EU level. In the Member States, process is organised and ensured by national working groups comprising, amongst others, of representatives of youth ministries, national youth councils, local and regional youth councils, youth organisations, young people from diverse backgrounds and youth researchers. Okay. So, the programme guide details the types of activities that can be funded under this action. Participating organisations can run a range of meetings which can include debate and information events linked to activities of the European Youth Week, events simulating the functioning of the democratic institutions, meetings that offer space for the active participation of young people on issues which are relevant to structured dialogue or the EU Youth Strategy, meetings that prepare the ground for official youth conferences run by the member state holding the presidency of the EU, any other meetings, consultations or debates between young people and decision makers. Page 185 of the programme guide has a little more detail on what these other meetings can look like, and I definitely refer to the programme guide if you want a fuller, more comprehensive list. It is important that young people lead on the activities and that they are actively involved in all stages of the project from preparation to follow-up. Statutory meetings of organisations or politically influenced events, however, are not eligible for funding. So that could be, for instance, sort of political parties arranging events that include young people. That would not be eligible. Okay, so moving on. It is important to link your KA3 project to the European priorities and show the added value of carrying out your project on a European level. When doing so, it is important to keep the general objective of the Erasmus programme in mind. More info about this can be found in Part A of the Erasmus programme guide, as well as the following important features of the Erasmus programme. Recognition and validation of skills and qualifications, for example, Youth Pass in the field of youth. Dissemination and exploitation of project results, for example, the use of the Erasmus logo, as well as the Erasmus project results platform. Open access requirement for educational materials, documents and media produced through Erasmus+. Another one is international dimension, i.e. cooperation with partner countries. Another is multilingualism, by giving young people the chance to pick up a few words in another language when they communicate with other young people abroad. There's also equality and inclusion, for example, by facilitating the access to learners with disadvantaged backgrounds and fewer opportunities compared to their peers. Lastly, there's protection and safety for participants by making sure all participants are in the possession of a European health insurance card, for example. Please also have a look at the specific objectives for the field of youth on page 28 of the programme guide. So for example, we have the focus could be to improve the level of key competencies and skills of young people. Another could be to foster quality improvements in youth work. And we also have to complement policy reforms at local, regional and national level, and to support the development of knowledge and evidence-based youth policy, as well as a recognition of non-formal and informal learning. To enhance the international dimension of youth activities and the role of youth workers and organisations as support structures for young people in complementary with the European Union's external action. Okay, we'll just move on. So we're going to move on to making an actual application. So, what is a Key Action Free Structured Dialogue project? So, projects funded under this action allow young people to get involved in dialogue with policymakers and stakeholder organisations. Projects aim to promote the active participation of young people in democratic life and to foster debate around the priorities set by the structured dialogue process and the renewed political framework in the field of youth. The meetings and initiatives that take place in a Key Action Free Structured Dialogue project fall under the two broad categories of national or transnational youth meetings. These are also the two activity types that you can select in the application form. Structured dialogue projects include at least one organisation active in the field of youth from a programme country. However, projects that foresee international meetings need to include a minimum of 2 organisations from two different countries. Organisations from partner countries neighbouring the EU can participate, but only as partners. If 2 or more organisations are involved, one organisation applies for funding on behalf of the whole partnership and has overall responsibility for managing the funding if the application is successful. Structured dialogue projects last between 3 months and 2 years, and you will build your project budget from a series of contributions to unit and actual costs per activity up to a maximum budget of €50,000 per project. Okay. Okay. So we'll move on to before you actually apply for your Key Action 1 project, what are the steps that you need to do? So once you've decided what it is you want to do and you've set up a partnership and thought about how to address different European priorities, you'll need to complete the following 2 registration steps. You will need to register on ECAS first. ECAS is the European Commission Authentication Service, and you'll need to register here to use any type of external European Commission tool. We have a video guide on our website which will talk you through how to do this, and you can find further information on this on our website also. You will then need to obtain a participant identification code, which for short we refer to as the PIC, to access the participant portal. The participant portal is a single entry point for the electronic administration of EU-funded projects related to Erasmus+. You'll be prompted to provide information about your organisation as well as upload documents related to your organisation. These documents are needed to prove the legal status and financial capacity of your organisation, and it is essential that the information on these documents matches the information on the portal. If your organisation already has a PIC, you should use that one and not create a new one. Please make sure all of the info is still up to date. If your organisation does not have a PIC, and please double check, you will need to obtain one. Please note, if you're applying for a new PIC, make sure you register onto the correct participant portal. The link is provided on our website and via Google as well. and it should be for the Education, Audiovisual, Culture, Citizenship and Volunteering portal, as this is the correct one for Key Action 3 if you're aiming to submit an application. However, if you were simply to search the internet, you might come across the Research Participant portal, which is not the correct portal for Erasmus+. You can find further information about the application process in Part C of the Programme Guide. If applicable, download the partner templates from our website and have them filled in by your respective partners and signed by both parties. Make sure that all of the information, such as the name of the organisation, address and legal representative on the partner mandate, is identical to the information in the application form. Otherwise, the partner mandate will not be accepted. Okay, so we'll just move on now. After the brainstorming and registration, you can move on to the actual application form itself. The application form is an e-form and will need to be submitted online by the applicant organisation by the deadline of the 4th of October 2016. Please keep in mind that this is 11 AM UK time, as the deadline for applications is 12 noon Brussels time. You will need to use your PIC as well as your partner's PICs to fill out the application form. It is very important that the PIC information is correct, as it will be used throughout the life of your project, and it is your responsibility to keep the information up to date. To make sure you have the correct KA3 application form in front of you, you should check that it states the call year is 2016, the round is round 3, and it should be for the 4th of October 2016 deadline. All applications submitted to the UK National Agency should be completed in English. Okay, so we will now go to the actual application form and run through it with you. As we go along, we will show you how to complete some sections of the form, as well as giving you hints and tips based on the feedback from previous application rounds. We will be using a test application for this exercise, as we cannot use applications from previous rounds due to data protection rules. So we'll just skip to that now, so if you just bear with us, and we'll just change the actual application form so you can see that in front of you. Okay, so this application form is an e-form and is available to download from the Apply for Your Youth Dialogue funding page of the Erasmus Plus website under Key Action 3. You should save it as a PDF to your PC. Please check that you have downloaded the correct application form for the third round of 2016. As mentioned on the slide, you can do this by checking the following. So I'll just scroll down so you can see all of the related information that you should see in front of you when you go onto the correct application form. Okay, so what you should see, as you can see in front of you, is the key action should be support for policy reform. The action should be stakeholder dialogue and policy promotion. The action type, as mentioned before, should be dialogue between young people and policymakers, and the call year should be 2016. The round should be round 3. The deadline for submission, as you will see, this is in Brussels time, so the deadline in the UK is 11 AM, as I mentioned before. So as I go through the application form, I will use the scroll bar to scroll up and down the page to the relevant sections of the form. I will concentrate on hints and tips for each section of the form as we go through the sections rather than describing all the information needed. And I will then concentrate on sections dealing with project activities and budget, showing how these link to each other, as well as giving you hints and tips on how to complete. You will need to select the language you are using to complete the application form from the drop-down menu. For the applications made to the UKNA, this should always be English. Okay, so you'll need to input your start date and choose the duration of your project, which will automatically fill in the end date for you. The start date for round 3 must be between the 1st of January and the 31st of May 2017. So I'll just scroll down so you can actually see where you enter the start date and the end dates, and you can see the duration is populated there for you, just as an example. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll to section C now. Okay. This section is sort of covering participating organisations. So this is where you would list all of the organisations that are involved in the project. So remember, when you put in your PIC and your partner's PIC numbers, the information will automatically populate from the information in the participant portal. So I'll just show you an example of this now. So I'm just going to click check, as we've got a PIC in there already, just so you can see how this works. So as you can see, it's populated all of this information for the lead applicant. Check the details, and if you notice any details are incorrect for you or your partner, they will need to be corrected in the portal. All participating organisations need to be identified in the application form, and you won't be able to add partners at a later stage. So please remember to include all partners that you want involved in the project whilst you're completing the application form, because there's completed and submitted. A good quality application includes specific detail, so naming the key persons who will be delivering the project and their skills is a very good idea. Explain how your organisation's previous experience of delivering projects or activities has contributed to developing the skills and knowledge needed for the activities you propose in this application form. Include details of young people your organisation typically works with in terms of geographic location and any additional needs they might have if you feel that this information is relevant. Please explain how the activities proposed in this application fit into other programs or activities you deliver. This will help the assessors understand what needs and expertise your organisation has, and this will make it easier to see the potential impact of the project on your actual organisation and your partners. Make sure it is clear from the description of each partner's work and expertise why they have been chosen to participate in your project. This applies to all partners, including smaller organisations which may be involved. Each of the application has a validate button. Each page of the application actually has a validate button, which you will see at the bottom of each page, as I'll show you now. So you can check information as you go along by clicking the validate button. So I'll just select that now just so you can see. Okay. This will identify if any mandatory sections have been missed and any errors in the way the information has been input. As you can see, the type of organisation field is mandatory and has not been populated. So we'll just go to that now so you can see how we amend this. So it's taken us to that relevant section, and what we're going to do now is select the drop-down menu, and we're going to scroll to the organisation type that we want to select. So for the purposes of this example, I'm going to select an NGO, association or social enterprise. So I'll just do that now. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is actually click validate to validate the information I've input. It's brought up another box just to remind us that some mandatory fields haven't been completed. So what we'll do now is just click OK to that and just see where it takes us. So I'll just write something in here just to fill the space as an example, and click validate again just to see what it brings up this time. So it's saying that our the email address hasn't been entered, so we'll go to that section now and we'll complete that for you. Okay, so we've done that now, and that should be all of the information it needs. So I'm just going to move on to section D of the application form. Okay, so we're on to section D, which is the description of the project, and I'm just going to offer some hints and tips again on this particular section. So you must show a clear link with the priorities of Key Action 3 and of the structured dialogue process by carefully considering the aims of Key Action 3, which are on page 185 of the programme guide. With regard to the structured dialogue process, as already mentioned, the themes set by the EU presidency countries for the structured dialogue during the period of January 2016 to June 2017, enabling all young people to engage in diverse, connected, inclusive Europe, ready for life and ready for society. You should also think about which of the general priorities for the field of youth listed in Part B of the programme guide are relevant and state them in this section. Explain the specific needs or issues your project will address based on a genuine needs analysis you or others have done in relation to the participants and policymakers you plan to involve. Okay. Should also describe the special need and specific needs of the specified participants and policymakers and show how your project will respond to these. It is very important that you should demonstrate how the young people you'll be targeting have actively helped shape the project proposal. As I mentioned before, young people should be involved at all stages of the actual project, so this again should be demonstrated here also. If you have listed any transnational partners, in case one or several transnational structured dialogue meetings, you should also link the needs addressed by the project to your partner country situation. This will back up your choice of partners. In case you are organising one or several national structured dialogue meetings, you still need to show that your project's priorities and activities contribute directly or indirectly to the structured dialogue process. Okay, so now we'll just move on to section E. So just scroll down now, as you can see. Okay, so in section E, this covers the participant's profile. So it is not sufficient to state the age and gender of your young people. You need to provide more specific information such as ethnicity and the issues that they face. The same with policymakers. You should define them and state their priorities or needs as clearly as possible. This information will have to be related to the aims of the project and the gaps it aims to address. Spend some time on the selection process of your participants, as this has also been one of the areas requiring further detail as shown by applications submitted in previous rounds. You need to explain in detail what recruitment and selection processes you and your partners will undertake. For instance, how many participants you will involve and how the processes will ensure the most suitable participants are selected whilst ensuring a fair process. For more information about participants with fewer opportunities, please have a look at page 11 of the programme guide, which provides further guidance on this. When it comes to working with participants with fewer opportunities, you need to demonstrate that they are relevant to the objectives of your project. If you work with this target group, you should clearly describe their needs in previous sections of the application. Your learning outcomes must also be clearly linked to the aims of your project and relevant to the needs of your participants, i.e. agreed with both the young people and the decision makers. Pay particular attention to increasing young people's civic engagement and competencies for active participation in democratic life. And also don't forget validation of learning outcomes. So for example, by using YouthPass or ASDAN for the UK. It is not sufficient to list them. You also need to explain how you are going to use them. If you are not familiar with YouthPass, you can find more information on page 217 of the programme guide, which provides more information on how to use YouthPass and why it may be useful to your project. Okay. So I'm just going to scroll down now past these relevant sections to section F, which I'm going to highlight a few hints and tips on also. Okay. So the focus of section F is on preparation, and I'll just give you some brief tips on this particular section. So within this section, mention any preparation activities that you will take place place before the start of your project activities, including practical arrangements and also including anything you've done so far before putting in your application or submitting it. But please be reminded that funding cannot cover any costs made before the start date of your project. So that's a really important point to note. We can't fund retrospectively, so if you already incurred expenditure, then you can't claim for that within the application form. Okay, so I'm just going to skip now to section G, which is the main activity section of the application form. So one issue we've encountered is that some applications lack detail in this section, which meant that it was not possible to confirm whether activities were in line with the objectives of the project, to what extent young people were actively involved in all stages of the project, and whether the methods proposed were appropriate. So as I've mentioned before, it's really important that young people are involved in all stages of the project, so that includes preparation also, and the main activities. Okay. So you'll need to use the space available and provide plenty of detail, including the example of who will actually deliver each activity and the project management plans and administration around it. All activities will need to use non-formal learning methods such as workshops, role plays, outdoor activities or roundtables. So describe here not only the activities but also how the learning is expected to take place. In some applications we received under the previous call, it wasn't always clear which non-formal learning methods would be used. You need to demonstrate here how you've ensured that your methods and activities are relevant to your objectives, as well as the learning outcomes and the impact that you intend to have. Methods should also be suited to both the young people and decision makers involved. So you should demonstrate that you've actually tailored this to the needs of your participants, both the decision makers and the young people themselves. So we'll just skip now to section G1, just so I can provide you with further hints and tips as well on this particular section. So we will cover this section in more detail as it relates to the activities which will feed into the budget. It is very important to keep in mind that the data here will need to correspond to the data in the budget section, otherwise you will not be able to validate your eForm. The activities that you'll need to detail in this section are grouped under the two broad categories of national or transnational youth meetings. You should add a table for each meeting you plan to hold during your project and select a number of answers from the drop-down menus available, and I will demonstrate this now. So before doing this, I'd like to highlight a couple of points here before we do the demonstration. So if you're organising national meetings, the activities should take place in the country of the applicant organisation. If you're organising transnational meetings, the activities may take place in any of the programme countries involved. This means that a partner from a partner country neighbouring the EU can be involved, but activities cannot take place in this country. With one exception, so only in duly justified cases and if the main activity includes elements of dialogue with decision makers at European level, an activity can take place at the seat of an institution of the European Union, which are Brussels, Frankfurt, Luxembourg, Strasbourg and The Hague. You need to annex a completed activity timetable for each activity. This is an Excel file available for download from the Erasmus Plus website on how to apply a key action free structured dialogue page of the website. Make sure that the activity timetable is consistent with the narrative and activity details in the application form. For example, in terms of duration of the activities, you need to make sure all details match, as inconsistencies could weaken the score for your application when it goes to assessment stage. You will need to use the distance calculator to fill out the distance band. A link to this is provided in your handout, and the distance is from cities and towns to choose the nearest one. So to choose the nearest one to your head office and the head office of your partners. The band that comes up is the band which you will need to input in the application form. This will then automatically populate with the unit cost. This cost is a contribution towards the return journey costs. Please ensure that you put in the right band as this will be checked at assessment, and if incorrect could affect the quality of your application. So what we're going to do now is actually take you through this section of the application form. So we'll just demo that now.
Okay, I'm just going to talk you through the information that Shante is going to be inputting into the form. Okay, Shante is going to select National Youth Meetings from the drop-down menu and select UK as the country. As already mentioned, you can also choose transnational youth meetings as well. And to work out the correct distance band between the venue and the beneficiary organisation, we're just going to switch to the distance calculator. The distance calculator works by inputting the town or city that will be the point of departure and arrival for the meeting. Our test organisation is based in Birmingham and the venue is London. As you can see, when Shante starts typing in, the distance calculator suggests different locations, so just select the correct one. Clicking the calculate button provides the distance in kilometres, and this is the number which dictates which distance band you need to select. Shante is now going to switch back to the application form to input this information. Shante is now going to select the distance band that matches the distance calculator. The start and end date need to be selected by clicking the arrow and using the calendar that pops up. If you just type the date, it might not be in the correct format, so the form might not validate. And if you're going to include any travel days, you'll also need to input the number of days. As you can see, we've entered 1. And for the participants, you'll need to input the total number of participants, which includes accompanying persons if needed. Shante's input a total of 50 participants, which includes 45 young participants and 5 accompanying persons. If your project includes participants with special needs or fewer opportunities, you should include those in the number of total participants here as well. You can use the plus and minus symbols below to add in any more flows for an activity, and the minus to remove any. And you can also add extra activities by pressing add activity and then remove the last activity.
Okay, so you have me again, it's Shante again, and I'm just going to talk through some more sections of the application form. So now what we're going to do is move to section H. So this section of the application form covers the follow-up activities that are going to take place as part of your project. And in this section you should be as specific as possible about the impact of the project in addressing the needs you have identified earlier in the application. One area that is not always well developed in applications submitted last year is the impact at local, regional, national and European or international levels. Projects under Key Action 3 should aim to make long-lasting impacts beyond those directly involved by working with organisations that are actively engaging with young people at local level or above. It is important that therefore you describe the impact of your project at various levels or policy making. An example could be policymakers being able to better engage with young people. So bringing young people, for instance, bringing young people and policymakers together so that the young people can influence the policymakers and their decisions. For dissemination, you need to show you have carefully planned your dissemination and mention what messages you want to share, what activities you'll undertake to do this, and when. As you can see, dissemination is here in H2, all under the same section. Plan for dissemination activity to take part throughout your project lifetime and not just at the end. Also, have a look at Annex 2 of the Programme Guide, which provides practical guidance on dissemination of your project. Another point is not to forget your evaluation activities. You should consider the learning outcomes and how the project has contributed to addressing the overall aims of Key Action 3. Lastly, you should also detail the qualitative and quantitative indicators of achievement that you plan to use in order to assess whether your project has achieved its objectives and results. You should attach numerical targets to quantitative indicators wherever possible and explain who will be looking after this task. Okay, so we're just going to move on from section H and then move to section I. Okay. Just moving down slightly. This brings us to the budget section of the application form. So you will find more detailed guidance on how to complete the budget section of the application form in our application guidance and in Part B of the Programme Guide. Getting the budget right is a quality criterion. Projects with a correct and duly justified budget are more likely to score high than those that do not. The maximum total grant available for any structured dialogue project is €50,000, as I previously mentioned. So you cannot request more than €50,000 in the grant calculator field in section J.2.1. Okay. So if the calculated grant amount is higher than €50,000, you will need to make adjustments under sections I.2 and I.3 and I.4. Otherwise, it will not be possible to validate the application form. I will talk more about the budget adjustments later, and I'll demonstrate these. It's important to note that the budget under all cost headings is built up on a unit cost basis per participant, except for exceptional costs and special needs support, which are budgeted for and reimbursed on the basis of actual costs. So as you can see on the form, if I scroll down a little bit lower, you can see special needs support is listed here, and if you go a bit lower, exceptional costs are also detailed. Okay. Unit costs can be understood as a set amount per participant, which is a contribution towards project costs. For some unit costs, you will spend more, and for some perhaps less than the unit cost. Unit costs are used to help make the funding simpler to understand and manage. Actual or real costs, as the name indicates, is in this case, you will receive funding for the actual costs incurred. Real costs are used for the budget heading exceptional costs and special needs support and can be fully or partly reimbursed. The budget categories for Key Action 3 Structured Dialogue Project are travel, as you can see here in front of you, organisational support, special needs support, and exceptional costs, if I just scroll down a little bit lower for you. Okay. Under travel and organisational support, the budget is calculated on a unit cost basis. Your request for travel funding in section I.1 must be linked to the main objectives you've detailed in section G.1. Yet the country of destination should be the country in which the applicant or one of the partners, and these are programme countries only, is based. The country of origin and destination will be the UK or any of your partner countries if you have planned transnational youth meetings and young people policy between young people and policymakers are being sent from the UK, from the countries in your partnership, or vice versa. As mentioned previously, the activities for a national meeting must take place in the UK, whereas for a transnational or international meeting, they must take place in one of the programme countries. See page 22 of the programme guide for further guidance on this. And these must be those that are involved in the project. The exception to this is an activity that takes place in the seat of an institution of the European Union. So as I mentioned before, these are Brussels, Frankfurt, Luxembourg, Strasbourg, and The Hague for both national and transnational international meetings. Most of the information has been pre-filled based on the information you already entered in the activity details section. The only part you can amend is the number of participants. So I'll just show you now that you can actually amend this, and I'll change the number from 50 participants to 60, just to show how you do this. Okay. In section I.2, you need to request your grant for organisational support. That is, money to be used for the organisation, management and implementation of your meetings or main activities. Once again, most of this information can be pre-filled from the activity details section, so you'll only need to input the numbers of participants. So just for the purposes of demonstrating this, I'll just change the numbers from 50, as you can see, to 40 participants. You will need to check here that the pre-filled information is correct, and if not, amend section G.1. So I'll just now try and validate, just to demonstrate this. Okay. The eForm has identified that we've included more participants in the budget for travel than have been included in the activity, which has prevented the form from validating, as you can see in front of you. Okay. So what I'm going to do is amend this so that it allows us to validate. So what I'll do is change the 60 participants to 50 participants. And then I'll try and validate again and see if this accepts this. Okay. So however, the eForm will still validate if you've included less participants in the budget than you have in the activity in section G.1, so make sure that you check this carefully. So what I'm going to do now, as you can see, the numbers don't correlate, as I've mentioned before. I'm just going to select OK here. And change the numbers so that it matches up with the activity details that we previously provided. So I'll just change this now to 50, as you can see in front of you. Okay, and that should amend the issue. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, that if the total grant calculated is more than €50,000 in section J.2.1, you will need to adjust the number of participants in section I.2 to ensure that this grant calculated is less than €50. Okay, so I'll just scroll down so you can see clearly. Section I.3 is to request any special needs support, that is, any additional costs that your organisation or any partners will incur to enable participants with a disability to take part in your meetings. For example, specialist equipment or accompaniment, so having someone to assist them if they have physical needs that require this. Special needs support is calculated on an actual cost basis and will be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Therefore, it is important that you make clear in the description of cost box, which I'll just show you now. So description of cost will just be here. You must clearly state what these costs are so that these can be considered by the assessor. Things that can be considered as exceptional costs under Key Action Pre-Structured Dialogue are costs connected to online consultations and opinion polls. And I'll just scroll to exceptional costs so you can see this. and so on. Sorry, just to take a step back. So exceptional costs are to be budgeted as actual costs also, and also need to be clearly stated in the description of cost spots, which is why you need to provide clear detail on this. Things, as I mentioned before, that can be considered as an exceptional cost under KA3, a cost connected to opinion polls, and these being online, and opinion polls of young people. You can also ask for this in relation to obtaining a financial guarantee and for dissemination activities, and this can be up to 75% of eligible costs. You can also claim for expensive travel costs of participants from outermost regions and overseas countries and territories, up to the maximum of 80% of total eligible costs. However, you will need to justify that the standard funding rules, based on the contribution to unit cost per travel distance band, do not cover at least 70% of the travel costs of participants. Other exceptional costs like visa and visa-related costs, residence permits and vaccinations, as well as costs directly related to participants with few opportunities, can be claimed to up to 100%. It is important to make sure that if you have requested either special needs support or exceptional costs, that the total grant calculated, as shown in J.2.1, is no more than €50,000. If it is, you will need to adjust the amounts requested. Okay. So make sure you have clearly described the main activities of your project and that the budget you request is consistent with your description, because budget requests can only be accepted if it is clear what the money is actually being used for. As a reminder, a person with special needs is defined under Erasmus Plus as a potential participant whose physical, mental or health-related situation is such that his or her participation in the project would not be possible without extra financial support. At the end of this section, you will, sorry, bear with me a second. At the end of the section, you will see a dialog box stating, please provide further comments you may have concerning the above budgets. As you can see here in front of you, the box is quite clearly stated. In this section, you can provide justification for any costs entered in the budget. So, for example, if you have any exceptional costs and you want to describe further what these costs are actually linked to and motivated by, then you can enter that in this field. Okay, so we'll just now move to section J now we've covered the budget. Okay. So, section J is designated for you to enter a project summary. And this summary will be used by the EC, that's the European Commission, and the national agency in their publications, and might also feed into the Erasmus Plus project results platform. So this should be kept in mind. It should be written in clear, plain English, avoiding any technical or sector-specific jargon to ensure that it can be understood by the general public. Okay, so just move slightly down to section J.1. Okay. In this section, you will cover details of the participating organisations, and this will offer a summary. Check that the information is absolutely correct in this section, so in case it is not, you can make the necessary changes in the earlier sections. So just to reiterate, you need to make sure your grant requested does not exceed €50,000, as previously mentioned. Okay, so we'll just move on from this summary of all the organisations, and we'll move down to section N of the application form. Okay. So this is the section where you will attach all of your annexes. And the compulsory annexes for Key Action 3 projects are a signed declaration of honour, the scanned mandates of each participating organisation to the applicant signed by both parties, and must also a timetable must also be attached, and this is described as a timetable of activities. These documents can be downloaded from the Key Documents section of our Apply for Youth Dialogue funding page of the Erasmus Plus website. Your project application will be ineligible without the first two of these attachments. The lack of completed timetable of activities will mean that your application will receive a lower score under project management and implementation, so please don't forget this either. Okay, just to demonstrate the actual activity timetable, I'm just going to switch to that now, and we'll talk you through it.
Okay, I'm just going to talk you through the activity timetable that you can now see in front of you. So you'll need to use the activity numbers from the application form, and all the information about the venue and duration should match the activity detail of your eForm. You should clearly detail the activities and methods used for each day of the activity, and this should correspond to the information in section G of the eForm. So if you have multiple flows within activity 1, you should put them all onto the same sheet, and you can do this by copying and pasting the table just below, as Shantae is about to do now. And you should fill this in for each flow of the activity. And if you have multiple activities, you can copy this table across to the next sheet and create as many sheets as you have activities. As you can see, Shantae is just copying this over to the next sheet. And we'll now switch back to the application form.
Okay, if there's still some room for attachments once these 3 compulsory annexes are attached, you are able to attach other relevant annexes, such as the needs analysis and a sample work program, for example. A tip here is to keep it concise. We expect that all information which is key to the quality and content of your project should be included within the main body of the application form. Okay, I'm just going to skip to section O. Okay, so now a few final words on the submission procedure. As you can see, we're in the submission section. So our first tip is to validate as you go and after completed the application. So I'm just going to actually try and validate the form now for you just to demonstrate this. And as you can see, you'll be taken to any sections that are incorrect or have been missed. So these will need to be resolved before you submit the application form, because it won't let you bypass this. So I'll just select OK now, and it was taking me to the section that's saying that I need to complete. So just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to input test, just so that it lets me actually validate. So we'll just try that again and go back to section O. Okay. I'm just going to select validate again. Okay, so as you can see, it's actually let me validate the form that time because all of the mandatory information has been input in the relevant fields. Another tip that we suggest is to refer to section K, which I'll show you now. Okay. So this is where the checklist and the data protection notice are listed. So it's really important to have a look at this before you submit your final application. So I'll just scroll back to the previous section, section O. Okay. You should also ensure you are connected to the internet when you submit. Another tip that we suggest is to save the final completed version of your application form to your PC in case of any submission issues. You should also note the deadline mentioned in the form is in Brussels time. The form needs to be submitted online by 11 a.m. UK time on Tuesday the 4th of October 2016. We would advise that you leave plenty of time to complete your application form and submit it online well before the deadline in case of any unexpected technical difficulties. And that would be our last tip in terms of submission. What we're going to do now is to launch the second of our polls just to see, just to get your feedback. So that's just going to be launched now, and you should see that appear on your screens.
Okay, our second poll for you is just to ask whether you intend to submit a Key Action 3 youth application for the round 3 deadline, which is 4th of October. So I'll just give you a moment to answer that question. Okay, just waiting for a couple of more answers to that question before we carry on. As you can see, the majority of you are planning to submit an application in round 3, so I hope the hints and tips that you've seen so far will be used in your application.
So now you've completed the poll, and we'll just move back to the presentation we started with. We're just going to cover application requirements now, as you can see on the screen. And once we have received your application, we will do some preliminary initial checks on your application. Your application will not go forward to assessment if your start and end date as well as the project duration are not in line with the criteria for round 3 specified in the programme guide on page 186. Your budget contribution requested for Erasmus Plus it's over €50,000. So again, as mentioned before, if it exceeds €50,000, then this will not be accepted. Also, it will not go forward to assessment if you do not have the minimum number of partners in case of a transnational meeting. Also, failure to submit by the deadline will result in your application not being moved forward to assessment. As a part of the assessment process, the NA will also check that the requested budget is in line with the funding rules set out in Part B of the programme guide. If these rules are not respected, your requested budget may be reduced on assessment. Okay, just bear with me a second. Please make sure that you read your program guide and the national agency guidance available on our website for further details on the eligibility requirements before you submit your application, which is a very important point to note. Okay, we'll just move on now to validation. The Erasmus Plus national agencies will be validating your organisation and also your partner organisations. This is a separate process to the assessment of your application. Therefore, the fact that your organisation has been validated does not automatically imply a successful outcome for your application. During the validation process, the national agency will check whether all the information you've put into the participant portal is complete and correct. We will check whether the required legal and financial forms have been uploaded, as well as the supporting documents. More information about this can be found in Part C of the Programme Guide, starting on page 237. Your partners will also need to be validated by their national agencies. Please note, organisations that are not validated cannot take part in Erasmus Plus funded projects. If you or your partner cannot provide the correct and fully completed documents during the validation process, this may cause significant delays to the processing of your application and may even result in the NA withdrawing its offer of funding if your application is successful. Okay, so we'll just move on to just some final reminders about the budget. So some key points to remember about the budget. The maximum grant that can be awarded for structured dialogue project is €50,000, as you can see on the screen. The contribution based on unit cost, which means funding automatically calculated depending on the unit. This can be the amount of participants for a certain duration or a set cost per distance travelled, for example. Budget headings using unit costs of travel and organisational support. Contribution based on real costs are budget headings used in real costs, which under KA3 are special needs support and exceptional costs, and these can be funded up to 100%. Under exceptional costs, you should distinguish between costs connected to consultations and opinion polls of young people, potentially online, and costs for financial guarantee or dissemination activities, because costs for financial guarantee or dissemination activities are only fundable up to 75% of the cost. For expensive travel costs of participants from outermost regions and overseas countries and territories, you can request up to 80% of your eligible costs. Any other costs under exceptional costs can be remunerated up to 100%. Your budget should be appropriate to your activity and demonstrate cost-effective use of your resources. Several of the budget lines are conditional on you demonstrating added value, and you'll need to clearly justify, especially for real costs, why you're requesting a certain amount of funding. For example, the cost for an opinion poll should be justified. Adequate resources to a realistic number of respondents. Okay, so we'll just move on now. Okay, just to reiterate some points about the application annexes. The following documents need to be annexed to the application form. So the Declaration of Honour signed by the legal representative mentioned in the application should be attached. Also, the mandates of each partner to the applicant signed by both parties with the information identical to the information about the partners in the application form should be attached also. And as mentioned previously, you should also attach the timetable of activities template, which we have taken you through before. We recommend that where possible you scan different documents together in a single file. If after checking that the annexes are within the size and file format limits, you still experience problems with attaching annexes, you can email them to the erasmusplus@chorus.com inbox, clearly stating which application form they relate to by providing the application hash code and your organisation's details and project name but please only do this as an exception and ensure you have followed all of the available guidance. Okay, so we're just going to cover some last top tips for submission, which would have previously been mentioned before, but we're just going to reiterate those now. You must ensure you have validated all sections of the application form before submitting. You will need to ensure that you are connected to the internet in order to submit your completed application form. You should also ensure that all sections of the form are valid and all annexes are attached before submitting the form. If there are any technical issues preventing the form from being submitted, it will say error under status, and this is within the application form itself. If this happens and you are unable to submit the form, you should follow the alternative submission procedure. In this case, you can still submit your application by sending it via email to us within 2 hours of the official deadline. However, the UK National Agency will only accept applications via the alternative submission procedure if the error message is recorded under status in the submission summary section of the eForm with a timestamp prior to or the deadline date and time. The following error messages are not accepted as technical issues. So the first being error 01, as this error relates to invalid data, missing fields in the eForm. This is not considered to be a technical issue and can be rectified by the applicant by correcting the application form and validating it again. The second error is error 06, and this error means that there are errors with the annexes, i.e. the total size of the attachments exceeds 5 megabytes or are not in the accepted file format specified above in section N. This can be rectified either by reducing the size of the attachments or removing them. The third error is unknown, as this means that the eForm was not submitted and no submission attempts were made. The fourth error possible is local 01. This is where the Adobe Reader security is enabled. In order to submit the eForm, you must click the appropriate options in the yellow security warning bar at the top of the form. The fifth error that's possible is local 02, which is network connection error. In order to submit the eForm, you should check your internet connection and try to submit the form again, or try a different network connection. Okay, so we'll just move on. So with those points covered, before we conclude, I'd just like to go through some key points for you to remember. Before and while you complete your application, refer to the Commission's documents. First of all, the Programme Guide and the National Agency's own guidance available from our website. If you have applied before, don't forget to review the feedback you have received from us. This will include key areas of improvement which will enhance your chances of submitting a good quality application. Save the form frequently so no information is lost. Another important point is to ensure correct options are selected on the application so that important sections aren't deleted. As I've said, while looking through the application form, double check that the budget you request is accurate and well justified and that you respect the maximum amounts allowed. You should also provide relevant answers to questions in the application, but remember that there is a character limit on many of the sections. Please note that the character limit is including the spaces as well. You can see the limit by hovering your mouse over the answer boxes. Another really important tip is to get someone else to proofread your application and annexes, perhaps against the published award criteria. You can find the award criteria in the Erasmus Plus Programme Guide. It is useful to check your application against the criteria to make sure each category is covered. And lastly, you should ensure that you leave enough time for completing and submitting your application before the deadline on the 4th of October 2016. Okay. So we're just going to move now on to the next steps and provide you with some contact details. Okay. So to conclude, I'd like to remind you of the support the UK National Agency will be offering in the run-up to the 4th of October deadline for applicants to be submitted under round 3 for Key Action 3. A recording of this webinar will be sent to you in the next couple of days. After this webinar, you'll be redirected to a feedback form. Please fill this out as we aim to continuously improve our service, and these webinars have taken on previous feedback just to try to make them better. Okay. Okay. Guide for applicants.